Japan is completely fucked, and I don't know what to blame this on exactly, but if I was forced to choose one single factor, I'd probably go with this bad boy over here. And don't get me wrong, I love Japanese media in all its magnificent depravity just as much as the next guy, but only a nation that was nuked twice could come up with this shit. And I know that's a bit of a tired meme, and I'm not saying there's a direct causal link between Hiroshima and the two pieces of radioactive trash I'm going to be talking about today, but I'm not going to completely dismiss that theory just yet either. The only reason I'm even aware of the work of literary genius that is EROMANGA-SENSEI is because of YouTubers Digibro and Best Guy Ever, who covered the show in their weekly podcast back in 2017. Now, while listening to their slow descent into madness over the course of the show's run was definitely both hilarious and informative, I never felt the need to actually watch the show alongside the podcast. That was until a couple of months ago when I decided to re-listen to those podcasts again, but this time I would actually watch each episode of EROMANGA-SENSEI before listening to the podcast. And, well, here we are. Being now utterly fascinated with this work of art, I decided to go back and watch the author's first major work, OREIMO, which I had known about for quite a while because of how popular it was when I was first really getting into anime back in the early 2010s, and how much I'd heard about its controversial ending. But I had never actually watched it, of course, because never would I ever stoop to that level of degeneracy. But now that I've watched EROMANGA-SENSEI, I was awfully curious to get to the bottom of why OREIMO had been so popular, and unlike EROMANGA-SENSEI, which was more of a meme than anything else, it seemed that there were a lot of people who genuinely did like OREIMO and thought it was a good show. But here's why you should be interested in watching a video about two shows that you already know from the title are complete garbage. What makes these two cases particularly intriguing to me is how similar their premises are, yet how different the execution of that premise is in each case. It's how these two shows manage to be utterly terrible in completely different ways which fascinates me. And if there's anything to get out of this, I would say it's the idea that despite coming from the same author and having a similar premise, similar fetish, and being adapted by the same studio, there are a million different ways a show can fail or succeed. Okay, so let's get into it, shall we? Starting with good old OREIMO. Now, the Japanese population has a long history of wanting to fuck its little sisters. Well, to be completely honest, the whole planet does. Look no further than any of the major porn sites and you'll see a homepage full of guys fucking their stepsisters. But no other nation had the courage to actually make cartoons about it, and no sitcom series has garnered the popularity of this one. I mean, there might be more popular shows that featured characters who wanted to fuck their sisters, but none that present this theme as its central premise. So what is it exactly about OREIMO that caught the attention of basement dwellers and mouth breathers from around the globe? So for those of you who don't know, OREIMO tells the story of Kyosuke Kosaka, your average 17-year-old light novel protagonist, and his tumultuous relationship with his sister Kirino, who in the first episode is revealed to be a massive otaku. This is the inciting incident of the story, and comes as quite a surprise to Kyosuke, seeing as, on the surface, Kirino appears to be a complete normie, a popular, attractive girl who even works as a model. It turns out that no one knows that Kirino is actually really into erogaze and anime in general, and specifically erogaze focused on little sisters. The plot kicks in when Kirino comes to Kyosuke in the middle of the night for what she calls life counseling. Essentially, she wants him to help her deal with her hobby and hiding it from their parents. And most of the drama comes from the two siblings' dynamic, which is emotionally strained, seeing as they've been pretty distant for a while, and Kirino just happens to be a complete piece of shit who physically and psychologically abuses her older brother repeatedly. But we'll get into that later. OREIMO's central theme seems to be about humanizing otaku. It's basically, at least in the beginning, an otaku rights show. This theme manifests itself in various ways throughout the series. Early on, it follows a pretty basic formula. Character finds out about Kirino's hobby and subsequently rejects her, but then Kyosuke talks them into overcoming their prejudice and eventually accepting Kirino for who she is. We see this in episode 3 when Kirino and Kyosuke's dad finds out about it, and in episode 4 and 5 when Ayase, Kirino's best friend, runs into Kirino at an otaku event and sees the manga she bought. The difficulties of living openly as a depraved otaku in the modern world is the driving message of the early episodes of the show. EROMANGA-SENSEI, on the other hand, doesn't really have a central theme. The show's premise essentially amounts to being the story of a 16-year-old who really desperately wants to fuck the 12-year-old who happens to live upstairs. Just to clarify, she is not his actual sister. They're not blood related. A year prior to the events of the story, Sagiri's mother married Masamune's dad, but unfortunately both parents died in a tragic accident and the two kids were left to fend for themselves, with a guardian that for some reason is never around. So now Masamune and Sagiri live in the same house, but Sagiri has locked herself in her room and supposedly never comes out. So Masamune cooks for her and washes her clothes and everything. And one important point to note is that the two of them have only seen each other once. One single time. The first time they met. After that, Sagiri just stayed in her room. So these two people are by no means whatsoever brother and sister. And I would say that all of this is just an excuse to be able to indulge in the incest fantasy without them actually being blood related, but considering the existence of the author's previous work, I don't think actual incest is a topic he's afraid of broaching. To me, it seems more like the original premise of this story had nothing to do with sibling lust whatsoever, but that Fushimi is so obsessed with writing main characters who want to fuck their little sisters that he just forced that element into the premise because why not? With the amount of time this show spends addressing the characters' writing careers, their aspirations, and various projects they begin and finish, usually within a single episode, EROMANGA-SENSEI does seem interested in exploring themes of creativity and artistic expression. Yeah, because I forgot to mention that our protagonist is a light novel author and that his sister does the illustrations for his books, although he didn't actually know it was her doing them until the first episode of the show. But the show doesn't seem concerned with exploring these topics in a believable or creative manner. None of these characters' relation to their writing and the creative process is believable in any way, nor do their stories give any interesting insight into the light novel industry. This criticism also extends to Sagiri being a NEET. It's not like I was expecting Welcome to the NHK, but if the premise of your show revolves around one of your characters being a hikikomori, maybe you'd want to do a good job of making us believe that she actually is one. While scenes like this one from episode 11, where Sagiri stands in front of the door waiting for Masamune's arrival after him being away for a few days, practicing how to greet him but then immediately retreating to her room as soon as she sees him approaching the door, can feel as if the show is at least trying to address certain issues related to her condition, at least insofar as it can be easily used as a marker of Sagiri's progression as a character. Details like the cleanliness of her room show that the creators weren't really interested in putting that much effort into painting the picture of a realistic, or at least believable, recluse. In short, there's so much more they could have done with this character other than her just not wanting to come out of her room. Watching through the early episodes of these two shows, you will also notice major differences in how they each structure their episodes. Whereas OREIMO feels like an actual show told in an episodic manner, with each episode introducing a new situation or conflict, which is then usually resolved by the end of the episode. For example, episode 1 introduces us to the inciting incident and the basic dynamic between Kyosuke and Kirino, and gives us an idea of the hardships and obstacles that could arise in the future. Episode 2 sees Kirino engaging with people who have similar interests to her and beginning to make friends by overcoming some of her own mental barriers, thus introducing us to the supporting cast. And episode 3 presents us with the first real antagonistic force and conflict, which is then resolved by the end of the episode. You know, like an actual, real TV show. EROMANGA-SENSEI, on the other hand, has a slightly different approach. This anime doesn't seem interested in presenting complete storylines contained in each episode, which isn't necessarily a problem, of course. You can have larger, overarching storylines that carry over from one episode to the next. This is called serialized storytelling, but EROMANGA-SENSEI doesn't really do this either. Instead, the early episodes seem to adhere to a strange formula of having half of the episode dedicated to one situation, sometimes just a single scene, and then the second half is something entirely different. EROMANGA-SENSEI does not give a single shit about structure or pacing, and at times it's honestly pretty hard to get through. Sequences just feel so drawn out and meandering. Episode 2, for example, starts with Megumi, who is Sagiri's class rep, coming to the house to try and convince Sagiri to come to school. And we spend 12 whole minutes watching her and Masamune trying to come up with ideas to get Sagiri to come out of her room. And it all builds to this strange melodramatic climax where Masamune explains why he's so proud of his little sister despite the fact that she's a hikikomori. And it just feels so out of place and disjointed because this supposedly emotional moment comes halfway through the episode, and then we have to get through a completely unrelated plotline of Masamune going to his editor and being introduced to his new rival, Elf Yamada. And none of this really builds on anything that happened in the first half of the episode. No work has been put into this to try and make these storylines flow nicely together and perhaps rearrange certain scenes so that the episode can build to a satisfying climax at the end of the episode. It's all just very lazily put together. But that's okay, isn't it? Because you're not watching this show for its narrative structure. So let's finally get into why you're actually watching these shows, shall we? And this is the point in the video where my mind collapses upon itself as I'm forced to actually care about these characters and their relationship drama, because now we're going to talk about the colourful cast of characters in each of these shows and how their storylines and character arcs play out, which will hopefully give us some insight into what these two shows were going for, starting with OREIMO. First off, let's name the players. I've already introduced you to Kyosuke and Kirino, so let's take a quick look at our supporting cast. First up, Minami Tamura, Kyosuke's childhood friend. Despite having the blandest character design imaginable, ensuring that Kyosuke will definitely never end up with this girl, she does play a major role in the story, especially later on in the show. So we'll be talking about her a bit more when we get there, but early on in the story, she doesn't really have that much to do, other than being childhood friend Glasses Girl, who is obviously in love with protagonist-kun. Kyosuke's somewhat complicated relationship with her is explored in episode 6. The episode opens with Kyosuke's friend asking him if he and Minami are actually going out, because of how close they seem. And when Kyosuke visits Minami's place later on, her family seems intent on getting them together. We understand that these two have been friends for a long time, and Kyosuke even ends up sleeping over. They comment on how strange it feels, seeing as they haven't done this since they were a lot younger, and there's some obvious tension between the two of them. And Kyosuke even asks Minami what she would do if someone told her they liked her. She answers that she doesn't know what she would do, then throws the question back at Kyosuke, who replies that he would turn them down, because he likes things just the way they are. Which I think is a really passive-aggressive way of telling this girl you're not interested. But she seems to take it okay, and they even make plans to do another sleepover at some point in the future. So who knows? Kyosuke is kind enough to give this girl just enough hope to cling on to that one day he might reciprocate her feelings. What a good guy. Then we have Ayase Aragaki, who is one of Kirino's model friends. Within the narrative, she essentially serves the purpose of being Kirino's normie friend who slowly has to acclimatize to Kirino's otaku interests, despite at first being disgusted by them. Then there's Saori Makishima, the one who gets everyone together but no one really cares about until she inevitably turns out to actually be really hot and rich. Because of course you can't have a female character who's actually ugly. Ugly people aren't real. Saori is the one who introduces Kirino to Kuroneko by organising a meetup with other otakus, and because of this she is a fairly important character who takes on the role of the intermediary between Kirino and Kuroneko, and also often finds herself helping Kyosuke out with his problems. She's basically a sort of mentor figure, someone who seems perfectly content with being perceived as a depraved otaku, which contrasts Kirino's fear of being judged by others. And then of course we have Kuroneko, who is essentially the third most important character after our two protagonists. Early on, Kuroneko is mostly characterized through contrasting her with Kirino, as she's basically her polar opposite. This is best exemplified in episode 7, where the conflict between Kuroneko and Kirino's tastes are brought to the forefront. And this conflict serves as the main dramatic driving force of that part of the episode, as Kirino, who has started writing light novels, wrote a story featuring a character clearly based on Kuroneko who gets violently raped. The tension between the two really comes from the fact that Kuroneko doesn't respect Kirino's writing abilities. This episode, however, also features a storyline where Kirino goes out on a date with Kyosuke in an attempt to recreate the situations that she's writing about in her novel in real life. And the only reason I'm pointing this out is because this idea is also featured heavily in EROMANGA-SENSEI, with a character who is supposedly incapable of drawing anything that she hasn't seen in real life. So Fushimi seems very interested in characters who can only draw or write about things they've actually experienced. We need to find out if this dude has a sister, guys. This is starting to look a bit suspicious. Anyway, Kuroneko gets further characterization in episode 9 when we see what her home life is like. Turns out she's not really the moody edgelord she makes herself out to be. She's actually a loving, caring sister. And this is where she becomes a viable waifu candidate, as everyone watching the show collectively starts to think of Kuroneko as actually being kinda cute, and the seed of the idea that she could become a potential romantic candidate for Kyosuke is planted. A seed that will turn to shit. But anyway, now that we've introduced our side characters, let's get to the good stuff, shall we? Our protagonists Kirino and Kyosuke's relationship basically works the same way any anime protagonist and classic tsundere girl relationship does, except this time the tsundere is the protagonist's sister, and that's mostly where the tsun comes from. The constant physical and verbal abuse Kirino throws at Kyosuke for absolutely no reason is extremely annoying, and at some points you do wish he would just slap her in the face. And the number of times I've seen Kirino react to something nice Kyosuke has said with an embarrassed blush that then immediately reverts back to a tsundere frown before she physically assaults him is honestly traumatizing, to the point where I've stopped complimenting people in real life out of a conditioned fear of being kicked in the face. Yes guys, that's why I'm an asshole. But this obnoxious behaviour isn't completely unrealistic, seeing as she is his little sister, and it is also interestingly commented on in one episode when the characters that Kirino encounters in her eroge reflect her own behaviour, and the irony of her getting annoyed at the tsundere sister in one of these games becomes one of the factors that engender a small change within her, because she realises that, oh shit, maybe I'm a bit of a bitch too. Obviously, the development of Kyosuke and Kirino's relationship is the main focus of the story, and throughout most of the first season, Kirino is an absolute bitch. But after taking it too far and pranking Kyosuke too hard by opening porn on his laptop and putting some Ero magazines on his bed when Minami comes over, she and the others organize a little party for Kyosuke where they dress up as maids. I'm not quite sure what the idea was here, but in the end, Kirino apologizes, gives Kyosuke a present, and for the first time, explicitly shows her gratitude for everything he's done for her, making a big change for her character. And in the next episode, Kyosuke becomes a bit suspicious of this sudden change, until Kirino asks him to wait in line for her all night for a new eroge. And upon returning home and spending all night playing the game with Kirino, she finally reveals to him what she's been hiding this whole time. Turns out she's going to America for track training. Apparently the whole thing has been organised, her parents have agreed to it and everything, yet no one thought to tell Kyosuke until the day of. What the fuck is wrong with this family? And this scene ends up being extremely melodramatic when the two get into a fight and knock the laptop off the table, and this happens.
俺にどうしろって言うんだよ。
行くなって言ってよ、お兄ちゃん。お兄ちゃんが止めてくれたら私どこにも行かないよ。夢はどこでも叶えられるけど、お兄ちゃんはここにしかいないから。ありがとうお兄ちゃん。これからもずっと一緒だね。
So in the end, the truth is revealed through this extremely melodramatic narrative device, which I'm sure a lot of weebs out there thought was really smart. The point is that Kirino just wants her brother to tell her that he wants her to stay. She just wants her brother's love, that's all. Don't we all? And in the end, she decides not to go. But this isn't the real ending. After the official ending of the first season, a 4-part OVA was released. Well, an ONA technically, but who the fuck cares? Which offers an alternate ending to the first season, called The True Route, as opposed to the good ending of the original series. When Kirino goes to show Kyosuke the album, the show offers Kyosuke the choice to either look or not look. In the original ending, he chooses to look and they fight over the album, and you know what happens after that. But in this OVA, he chooses not to look, and instead she decides to show him her sport festival badges. So in this version, they don't have their big confrontation, and Kirino ends up going to America. And the first episode of this reimagining ends with Kuroneko showing up as a student at Kyosuke's school. Episode 2 of the OVA develops Kyosuke and Kuroneko's relationship, and it's made clear that Kyosuke is essentially using Kuroneko as a replacement for Kirino. And it's in these episodes that we really start to better understand Kuroneko's motivations, her feelings for Kyosuke, and her desire not to continue coming in second place behind Kirino. And I'd like to take a moment to point out that these episodes actually do a pretty good job of building the chemistry between Kyosuke and Kuroneko in a way that feels natural and organic and kind of real. It's not forced, it just happens in a very deliberate, gradual way, and it feels believable. In the last episode of this OVA, Kyosuke visits Kirino in America, and things get extremely melodramatic again as Kyosuke just starts crying and begging Kirino to come home like a little bitch because he's so lonely.
結局それなんだよ。黒猫とか綾瀬のこともぶっちゃけおまけみたいなもんなんだ。俺はお前がいないと寂しくて嫌だから。
あんた
一緒に帰ろうぜ。じゃないと俺死ぬかもしれない。
Oh, fuck off. Other than the whole using Kuroneko as a replacement for Kirino thing, there hasn't really been any signs of Kirino's absence affecting Kyosuke. They mention him being lonely, but it's never explored through the character's actions. There could have been plenty of opportunities to show how his loneliness has affected his behaviour in small ways, but they don't really do that. He just gets caught up in narratively irrelevant game club shenanigans, and that's why this scene feels so over the top and undeserved. So she eventually decides to return to Japan, of course, but not before finally beating her really fast roommate in a race for the first time. So what the show is implying here, obviously, is that she could only beat this girl because Kyosuke came to see her, and that made her feel better. The power of incest, guys. It gives you superhuman abilities. What's annoying about Season 2 is that despite the big emotional climax of the OVA, everything essentially returns to normal, and Kirino returns to being the absolute arsehole she was in the first season, prompting the question, what was the point? Obviously, I didn't expect her character to do a complete 180 because that wouldn't have made sense either, but she's literally exactly the same character she was in the first season, and the emotional moments that occur later on would have worked just as well had her character developed a little bit going into this season, even if that meant just being slightly nicer to Kyosuke or having a few more moments of tenderness than before. Just little details, because as it stands, it seems like the realization she had at the end of the OVA meant nothing. Did she not come to some kind of big realization about herself and how important her brother is to her? Could that realization not have changed her outlook at least a little bit in Season 2? So jumping ahead, episode 4 of Season 2 ends on a big cliffhanger, with Kirino saying,
あんたにお願いがあるんだけど言いづらいんだけどさあんた私の彼氏になってよ
But of course, if you've ever seen a television show before, you know exactly what this actually means. What she's really saying is that she needs Kyosuke to pretend to be her boyfriend. So why didn't she just say that instead of saying that she wants him to be her boyfriend? Well, I think that question answers itself. And I'm gonna be real here. This shit is the lamest fucking excuse to get these two characters on a date ever. So let me explain the situation. So this manager wants to book Kirino as a model and take her to Europe, but Kirino doesn't want to do that, so she comes up with the excuse that she has a boyfriend, so she can't go to Europe, because she has a boyfriend. And first of all, they frame it as if she needed an excuse because she didn't want to just say no. But why? Why did she need an excuse? I mean, I can imagine you would want to come up with a good excuse if you intend on working with these people in the future and you don't want to just shoot them down, but why is the excuse of having a boyfriend better than the real reason? Why can't you just say, I'm a 14-year-old girl who just had a really bad experience living abroad, so I don't want to go to Europe right now. Sorry. That sounds a lot better than, I don't want to go because I have a boyfriend. But obviously all of this is just a justification to set up the plot of this episode that sees Kirino and Kyosuke going on a date together. Why? Well, because the manager lady asked if she could see Kirino tomorrow, and Kyosuke said no because they're going on a date tomorrow. So now they have to actually go on a date, right? Well, you might think, no, because how the fuck would this lady know if they went on a date or not? And I guess the show's explanation for why they would actually do this is that if by chance the lady sees them together, she might back off? Which, I mean, what the fuck does that even mean? So they go around assuming that she's following them the entire time. And this is the stupidest plotline I've ever seen. At this point, if you've watched this episode, you're probably thinking, well, the point of the episode is obviously that this lady wouldn't really be following them around, but Kirino is just saying that because she secretly wants to hang out with her brother, which is fine, I guess, but for that you have to accept that Kyosuke is dumb enough to go along with it and actually believe that this woman would follow a 14-year-old and her boyfriend around town all day just to confirm that they are in fact dating. And of course, at some point they run into two other characters just to create some dumb drama. At this point, the show isn't really interested in exploring any of the ideas that were being put forth in season 1, and instead focuses mostly on just throwing various situations and characters at Kirino and Kyosuke to further their relationship, or force them to confront their feelings about each other, or just point it out to the audience. This happened in one episode when Kirino's roommate from America came to stay with them. You know, the one Kirino beat in a race when Kyosuke came to visit. And in the end, it's revealed that the reason she came is to see what motivated Kirino that time she beat her. And now she knows. Now she has it all figured out. Because this little girl is so perceptive that she just knows that Kirino wants to fuck her brother. Because in this universe, when someone beats you in a race, that's the only plausible explanation. And immediately after the Pretend to Be My Boyfriend episode, we get to the introduction of Kirino's boyfriend. And if you've ever seen a romantic comedy of any kind before, you know very well that the only purpose the introduction of a boyfriend for Kirino could have, narratively speaking, is to add pressure to Kyosuke and perhaps lead to a big dramatic moment where he admits to Kirino that he's jealous, or maybe Kirino gets mad because he's not jealous and the only reason she has a boyfriend in the first place was to make him jealous. I don't know, something like that. And the way they present it is that Kirino doesn't explicitly introduce him as her boyfriend, so this leads to Kyosuke ruminating on the whole thing and questioning whether or not the two are in fact dating. And this is where Kuroneko affirms once more her feelings for Kyosuke. So immediately we can see where this is going, right? Both Kirino and Kyosuke have potential love interests, which is just going to make things awkward between the two of them, and like I said before, force them to confront their feelings for each other. Here we go. This is where OREIMO goes from being just a mediocre comedy anime with hints of a sort of weird sitcom element, but nothing too outrageous, to being a full-on melodramatic romance series, with love triangles and all. And this is where my brain tumor grows with each episode I watch. So Kirino confirms to Kyosuke, Kuroneko, and Saori that the guy is in fact her boyfriend and that they've already kissed. And then this happens.
は
あなた
何？言いたいことあんの？ないよね。
おい、
バカなお子様には付き合ってられないわ。
今のどういうことだよ。
は？
付き合ってるとかなんとか、なんでそんなことを今言ったんだ。
なんでだと思う？
知るかよ。どうするつもりなんだ。
あんたはどうしてほしい？それにあんないい人他にいないっての。誰かさんと違って顔はいいし、お金持ちだし、超才能はあるし、ちゃんと私の話を聞いて尊重してくれるしね。誰かさんと違って。何？
知るか。
Oh boy, here we go. Everything I predicted is already starting to happen. What I don't understand though is why Kyosuke gets mad at Kirino for announcing this and implies that there's some ulterior motive behind it. I guess he's thinking that she only announced this right now because she heard Kuroneko confessing to Kyosuke outside, so she wants to get back at him by telling him about her boyfriend. Sorry if this is getting a bit complicated, I would explain it better, but I just don't care. But you would only get mad at that if this girl was someone you had some kind of romantic relationship with, right? Why would your sister announcing the fact that she has a boyfriend make you upset and question her motivations? And why would Kuroneko leave? This would only make sense if all of the characters in this scene know this is a trashy, melodramatic anime where the two siblings have to inevitably end up together. So whereas before, the one thing I sort of appreciated about the show, which was the fact that the story wasn't forcing this incestuous relationship to happen, it was just kind of slowly building the two siblings' connection as they grew to appreciate each other and come to realize how important they are to each other, but without necessarily implying that they wanted to fuck. Now this scene is seemingly undeniably stating that fact, because there's no other reason why this situation would occur. I don't know, maybe it might seem to some like I'm exaggerating the impact of this one scene, but to me this felt like the show finally telling me, this is it dude, we're doing it, we're going full incest, and there's nothing you can do about it. And even worse than that, we're going to pretend this is just another romantic comedy, and we're going to let it play out the same way any other romantic comedy would. So of course Kyosuke starts acting like a complete arsehole to the dude when Kirino invites him over. So the show does something kind of good, which is have Kyosuke walk in on his dad getting drunk by himself in his bedroom and defend Kirino's decision to date this guy because his dad's unreasonably objecting to it just out of a sense of paternal protectiveness. So this scene forces Kyosuke to confront his own immaturity in response to the relationship and comes to terms with it by once again defending Kirino to his father. So Kyosuke decides to go and apologize to Kirino and her boyfriend for his behavior. And he explains his anger away as just being his reluctance as a brother to let his sister be taken away by some guy he doesn't know, and he asks him to prove his worth to him. And this is the point where I wonder what exactly is going through Kyosuke's mind. Can he really justify this to himself as being normal behavior for a protective older brother? Or does he know deep down that he just really wants to fuck his sister? Because I can't imagine an actual normal brother, especially one who has such a bitch of a sister, acting this way. You would only act this way when finding out that your sister had a boyfriend if you wanted to fuck your sister. I mean, come on, dude. But of course, now we get the big twist.
よかったですね、桐野さん。これで僕の役目はおしまいですよね。
どういうことだ。
とりあえず僕が桐野さんと付き合っているというのは嘘なんです。
はあ、嘘だと？どうして？
桐野さんはお兄さんに気づいてほしかったんですよね。
違う。
じゃあなんだよ。
それはあんたが
いいよ。無理に言わなくていいっつうの。
And now, I ask the same question to Kirino. What the hell does she think she's doing right now? How can you justify having a fake boyfriend for the sole purpose of making your own biological brother jealous? What is going through her mind when she makes that decision? The point I'm trying to make here is that both of these characters must know at this point that they want to fuck each other. And yeah, sure, you can just say that, well, they're siblings, so they're obviously in denial about whatever incestuous feelings they're having, but you can't just brush off these events. They're too much, they're too big. I don't like the fact that this show just resolves these moments with a pat on the head and a smile, like it's all okay and we can move on as if nothing happened. But we do, as the episode ends with Kuroneko finally asking Kyosuke out. And the next day, after considering the matter thoroughly, he decides to accept. So Kyosuke and Kuroneko go on their first date, and at the end, Kuroneko gets this book out full of drawings she's done where she's detailed everything she imagines her perfect relationship being. But there's also a drawing of Kyosuke and Kirino sitting across from each other, smiling. And when Kyosuke asks what that is, Kuroneko says that it's what she wishes for the most in the entire world. Wait, what? And when Kyosuke says that he doesn't understand, she's like, I guess you're not there yet. Now, obviously when I saw this scene for the first time, I didn't interpret it as meaning that Kuroneko wants Kyosuke and Kirino to end up together, like that's her ultimate dream for some reason. It's more along the lines of her wanting them to get along. But still, why would that be the thing you want the most in the entire world? Why does every character's entire life have to revolve around this guy's relationship with his fucking sister? It's like the universe itself is shipping these two characters way too hard. I mean, obviously it is, because the universe is written by a guy writing a sitcom light novel, but still, the characters don't know that. Okay, I'm gonna call this now. If this ends with Kuroneko breaking up with Kyosuke because of some bullshit explanation like, oh, in the end, us being together made your relationship with Kirino even worse, and that's the opposite of what I wanted to happen, so we have to break up, I'm gonna fucking kill myself.
この夏、私と過ごしてどうだった？
楽しかったよ。お前と過ごした今年の夏はきっと一生忘れない。今までよりもずっとお前のことが好きになった。
ありがとう、京介。
次はどうするんだ？
ええ。次はこれよ。
Fuck you, man. Why the fuck am I doing this? Kuroneko has broken up with Kyosuke and moved away. So Kyosuke's like, what the fuck? But he and Kirino manage to track her down and confront her. But Kuroneko forces Kirino to reveal her true feelings regarding her brother. She admits that she didn't actually approve of their relationship because she can't stand not being Kyosuke's number one, but was holding it in this whole time. So it turns out that Kuroneko broke up with Kyosuke because she saw how badly Kirino was handling it, and oh my fucking god, I'm gonna fucking kill myself, I can't believe I'm still watching this piece of shit. So eventually Kuroneko asks Kyosuke what he wishes to do. Either respect the fact that Kirino doesn't want him dating anyone, or resume his relationship with her despite that. But she pussies out before he gives her an answer, fearing that he might reject her. And the episode ends with the establishing of an extremely toxic and weird relationship, with Kirino and Kyosuke admitting to each other that they don't want each other dating anyone and are therefore stuck. What the fuck is wrong with these people? Again, we've reached a point where there's no way these two people don't realize they just want to fuck each other. They've excluded all other options. There's no one they can date other than each other. Just fuck already, for fuck's sake! In the next episode, we get some more development of Kyosuke and Kirino's relationship, as Kyosuke melodramatically cycles her to a concert, and Kirino sees how devoted her brother is to her, and I mean, who the fuck cares? And now that the two siblings are as close as they've ever been to actually getting it on, this is when the parents intervene. After finding that picture Kyosuke and Kirino took of their fake date on the fridge, their mum accuses them of being too close, and accuses Kyosuke of acting weirdly around his sister. And at first when I saw this, I thought, oh, this is going to be another classic bait and switch. You open the episode with the mum accusing him of being weird, and try to make us think that she's accusing them of incest, but then it turns out it's something retarded and completely unrelated. But no, their mum actually thinks they're too close, in a weird, incestuous way. She's genuinely worried that her children are fucking. I mean, she doesn't say it explicitly, but that's the implication here. And she's mad, but she doesn't really seem that upset about it. And the worst part is that they don't even really deny the accusation. What the fuck is wrong with this family? So their dad decides to put Kyosuke up in an apartment until he passes his entrance exams for college, and he can only return to the house if he gets an A. That's right, son. You're only allowed to fuck your little sister if you get good grades. Now go revise for your exams, you little rascal, you. I'll skip over the absurd housewarming party where the entirety of Kyosuke's harem fights over who will get to cook for him while he's studying for his exams, that culminates in Kirino electing Ayase to essentially become her brother's housemaid, which she accepts to do because all of the girls in this show will literally drop everything else they have going on in their lives to focus on cleaning up for this worthless piece of shit light novel protagonist in a second if they have to. Remember the first season where Kyosuke's relationships with the other characters sort of made sense? You had his tsundere sister who, while generally acting like a complete arsehole towards her brother, had an underlying affection for him. You had Minami, who's Kyosuke's childhood friend and is clearly in love with him, and probably has been for a while, but her unrequited affections have led to her sort of accepting that they'll probably never be together. Then you have Ayase, who just thinks Kyosuke's a complete pervert and wants nothing to do with him unless it can help her be a good friend to Kirino. And you have a genuine burgeoning romance between Kyosuke and Kuroneko when she transfers to his school and they start spending more and more time together. How did that degenerate into this? Why the fuck is this girl here? I don't even know her name and I refuse to look it up. Why the fuck is she pretending to be Kyosuke's boyfriend? Why is Saori now also a member of this absurd harem? What the fuck has happened here? I'm losing my fucking mind, guys. And of course, the climax of this storyline is that when the month is over and Kyosuke finally got his A and can go back home, Ayase comes to see him as he's leaving the apartment and admits her true feelings to him. Turns out she's in love with him too. Who could have fucking guessed? Well, to be honest, not me, because this basically goes against the entirety of her characterization before this particular episode. Ayase has always been characterized as being essentially obsessed with Kirino and being a good friend to her, to the point where it was pretty clear that she maybe kinda had feelings for her. I mean, that's debatable. You could argue that she's just a very possessive friend, although that episode where she imitates the behavior of a girl from one of Kirino's favorite eroges suggests her feelings run a bit deeper than that. But what's not debatable is that Ayase did not have feelings for Kyosuke. She repeatedly accuses him of sexually harassing her. She repeatedly calls him a pervert, and she repeatedly prioritizes Kirino over anyone else. So why is she now having this weird melodramatic breakdown as she confesses her love to him? A love that I can only believe formed over the course of this single episode. Why? Did we really need this? Did we really need another girl in the harem? I guess Kyosuke's charm really is just irresistible. Okay, so the last episode of the season details Kirino and Kyosuke's childhood, from Kirino's perspective. So of course this is where we find out that all of the major decisions in Kirino's life were in some way influenced by her love for her brother. Because in this kind of story, everything has to be about incest. Incest is the source of all life and the only thing that motivates people to keep on living. Turns out they were really close when they were kids, but as they grew older, Kyosuke stopped wanting to hang out with his little sister all the time and started spending more and more time with Minami. This led to one occasion where Kirino wanted to go out with Kyosuke, but he told her that she could only come if she could keep up with him. Being too slow to catch up, Kirino then decided to join the field track team so that she could one day give her brother a taste of his own medicine. This passion was also inspired by Kyosuke being the fastest kid in his class back in the day. This episode also shows the origins of Kirino's disdain for Minami, as she perceives Minami to be the one who essentially stole her brother away from her. Oh, and her decision to become a model was also born from her admiration for Kyosuke for some reason. I didn't really get this one. When explaining why she's a model to ISA, she remembers a memory of Kyosuke showing her this flyer for the cultural festival that he made, and I'm not really sure what the connection there is, but the point is that her entire life and personality emerged as a reaction to her brother's behavior, and it's at this point that Kirino started getting into eroge. So it seems like this obsession with Siscon anime and games was born out of a deep-seated desire to return to a simpler time where she and her brother were close, something she's now unable to admit to herself or attempt to recreate, seeing as how distant they've become over the years. And we then revisit the previous events of the story, but with the added context of Kirino's narration. And the main arc that the story seems to be pushing at this point is that Kirino always looked up to Kyosuke. She admired him. He was smart, active, friendly. Her image of her older brother was idealized. But as they grew up, Kirino realized that Kyosuke wasn't perfect anymore. And as Minami says, maybe he never was. And Kirino accuses him of becoming lazy. She's mad at him for not living up to that idealized image. But in the recent developments since Kirino first asked Kyosuke for help, he's become more active and admirable once again. So this dynamic that the siblings have is being framed as a positive for Kyosuke, pulling him out of his lazy and detached attitude. It feels like this flashback is trying to make us sympathize a bit more with Kirino as a character and justify her personality a little bit, which it does to an extent, but it kind of makes it even worse, because now that we know that she's conscious of why she's acting the way she is, it makes it even more annoying that she's such a relentless tsundere. So the second season ends back in the present with Kirino asking Kyosuke for more life counseling. But of course, this isn't the end. We still have one more OVA to get through. And oh boy, what a masterpiece. But before we get into that, let's take a look at how EROMANGA-SENSEI handles its various characters and relationships. But for that, you'll have to join me in part 2. And I swear I'm going to try real hard not to turn this into some kind of giant 4-part series, because to be honest, I'd have a really tough time trying to explain that to our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. He would not forgive me. And oh yeah, support me on Patreon, because I'm dying for your sins over here.